This is problem 4.06 from End of Chapter Problems in Chapter 4 of the CFA Institute textbook, Corporate Finance, A Practical Approach. Here we're given some information about Hyundai Motors and asked to calculate the break-even level of the operating break-even and the profitability break-even level of sales for the company. Alright, so let's write down what we know here. Right now, the units sold which we'll label as Q is 1 million units. The price per unit is $3,529. The variable operating cost, which we'll call V, variable op cost, are $1,500 per unit. Fixed cost, which are, if you sell 0 units, you still have to pay the fixed cost. And the fixed cost are given in the problem as 1,290,000,000, 1,290,000,000. Alright, so the other thing we have is interest expense, which has to be paid as well in order for the company to be making a profit, and that's 410 million. That's a lot of interest. All right, so given this information, we can actually reconstruct an income statement. All right, revenue, which would be PQ, is equal to the number of units sold times the price. All right, so revenue $3.5 billion. Variable cost, which is VQ, be equal to 1 million units times $1.5 million per unit. And that'll give us a contribution that'd be PQ minus VQ. The contribution would be a little over $2 billion. The fixed op cost, the F, 1,290,000,000, so that'd be the operating income, which I'm going to call EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, would be 739, and then the interest expense, and T, equal to 410. Alright, so that would give us taxable income of 329. Alright, so put my accounting lines underneath every place where I'm doing a calculation. I've got all that stuff in here. When I'm looking for the break-even, okay, the operating break-even is the point at which operating income is exactly equal to zero. So break even means I didn't make a profit, didn't make any loss, I broke even. So at the point where PQ minus VQ minus F equals zero, that's your operating break even. All right? And the question is also asking us for the break even, or the net income break even, basically. Now, if we got the taxable income of zero, the tax on that would be zero, so net income would be zero. So the net break even, or the bottom line break even, would be very similar to the operating break even, except that we would also recognize that it'd be the point where the interest expense subtracted out would be part of the equation. Okay, so to calculate these numbers is actually pretty mechanical exercise. If I take PQ minus VQ minus F and set that equal to zero, I'm solving for units, right? So if I know what the Q is, and again, solving for Q in all of this will give me the break-even numbers I need, but it's going to be different depending on whether I'm doing the overall break-even or just the operating break-even. All right, so if I took P minus V times Q minus F, set that equal to zero. Sorry, I'm just using some algebra to rearrange terms. Then shift the F to the right hand side. So I added F to both sides, it drops out over here. And then 0 plus F would be F. And then my Q would then be equal to F divided by P minus V. Okay? So if I want to solve for my number of units here, Q equals F, the fixed operating cost, divided by P minus V. P minus V. All right, now the price minus the variable operating cost is the contribution. So that'd be every unit would contribute roughly $2,029 to the overall payment of fixed operating costs. So if each unit consists of enough money to pay $1,500 a variable and then contributes $2,029 towards the fixed, then I can easily solve for how many units would it require, and that's in units, not in dollars. That'd be the number of units I'd have to sell in order to break even. And I can plug that in up here and check my answer. So if I took price times this quantity, and then I took the variable cost of $1,500 times this quantity, that would give me exactly $1,290,000,000 of contribution towards the fixed cost. The contributions are exactly $1,290,000,000, so I would have EBIT as zero. Now, it won't help me with the operating, that'll help me with the operating, but I would still not have enough units to pay the interest expense. That's why we calculate not only the operating break-even, which will give me an EBIT of 0, the net break-even is simply adds a few more elements to it. All right, we do the same math and still come out to essentially the formula is then Q equals the fixed cost plus the interest expense divided by P minus V. Okay? So if I do that calculation, I take the fixed cost plus the interest expense, divide that by P minus V, and that's not dollars, it's units. Then it'll tell me that I need 837,000 units. We could calculate that here as well. If I take the price times this new break-even units, and then the variable cost of $1,500 per unit times the number of units, that gives me 1,700,000,000 of contribution. The fixed costs are 1.2. So my operating income is exactly 410 million. I subtract the 410 million of interest and I'll break even. So the units would be basically be 635,000 units to break even with respect to operating income, and 837 million to break even, or 837,000 to break even with respect to total net income. All right, so those are my two answers there. And if I go 2,243,000,000 and 2,900,000,000. All right, and that would be this answer here, answer B.